Rudy comes to Steve and I in about the 10th of October of 2020, and he says, wow, you guys, I have what I think is a copy of Hunter Biden's laptop. But he's up in New York. Steve goes up to New York to have a meeting with him. They kind of take a look at it, but it's Rudy operating a laptop, right? So it's like going to your dad to figure out how to use Facebook. It really wasn't that good. And they were kind of grinding it out with little success, and they wanted me to come to New York and review it, and Steve said, no, send it down to DC and Maxey will get on it. So this was on or about the 14th, 15th of October of 2020 that it was delivered to me. I immediately opened it up, and I start with the presumption that liars lie, cheaters cheat. And as an old Wall Street guy, I decided, okay, the first place I'm going to look is inside the broker-dealer, Rosemont Seneca, which for people from Pennsylvania used to be the family office for the Heinz family. And Chris Heinz was an early partner of Hunter's. This is how they converted this family office into a broker-dealer. I immediately found falsification of records with the SEC and FINRA, backdating of accounting numbers, money laundering, unaccounted for things, questionable reporting where they're debating whether or not they report the truth. This was in the first 30 minutes. Within 2 days, we started uncovering all of the Chinese espionage, all of Hunter's activities around the world. And to give you all an understanding of what a good man Sam Faddis is and what a great patriot and friend he is, the very first person that I called when I got this thing was Sam Faddis. And Sam Faddis got in his car, drove 5 hours down to Washington, D.C. We looked at it because I just wanted another set of eyes on it, someone that I could trust. And it was 100% real. We both knew it was real from day one. Now, on the 17th and 18th of October, we've been trying really hard for several days to see if a major news media would take this up. The Daily Mail turned it down. Fox News turned it down. The New York Post turned it down. And then my producer, a guy named Vish Burra, had a girlfriend at the New York Post. He turns to me while I'm debating this with Steve and Rudy. He says, I have a friend who's a reporter there. I said, send her the screenshots, send her the PDFs, see what she says. And this young woman, and this shows you the power of individuals, apparently walked into the newsroom and said, you guys publish or I'm bailing and I'll publish it tomorrow and explain why. So that's how we got the first two articles, which today would be considered relatively benign. I feel like, I hope you guys don't think I feel like I'm at parade rescue with this microphone I can't walk around with. But, so she published it, they published it, and on the 19th of October, and this is very important because I want people to come away from this discussion today understanding who the enemies are of American freedom, our electoral process, and every other thing that we hold dear. On the morning of the 19th, less than 24 hours after the second article, John Brennan, former director of the CIA, Clapper, former director of National Intelligence, Leon Panetta, former director of CIA, and Michael Hayden, the both heads of the two-headed snake, who was also head of NSA and CIA, came out with an open letter to the American people declaring that Hunter Biden's laptop was a fabrication of Russian intelligence. This was 2 weeks before a national election. So let's stop talking about how it got stolen by a company or what have you. Because just this morning, the New York Post published a poll finding that found that 79% of the American people say that Joe Biden would not be elected, have been elected, if they knew about Hunter Biden's laptop. So who suppressed it? The CIA, the FBI, the Department of Justice, the State Department. They're all guilty, and they're partners in the mainstream media. So I immediately began reporting on this. The night of the election, I passed out 60 thumb drives with 8,000 emails and 1,000 PDFs to half of the media in Washington, D.C. Have you seen anything? Nah. In fact, and this might be troubling for some, the reason I left War Room was because I was told I was going to get fired if I mentioned the FBI and Hunter Biden's laptop in the same sentence one more time. Well, you know, I had to quit because I wasn't going to stop. And hey, listen, you know, I'm standing up here. It's a great honor for me to be here before such a great group. And I'm looking across this room right now, and I see America, you know. I see everything that I love right out there, right? Because nobody would be foolish enough to do what I'm doing if they didn't have love in their hearts. Love for my country, love for my God, that I took an oath and swore to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I haven't gotten an order changing that. So we're going to carry on. So I leave Steve Bannon's War Room. Actually, I should, you know, why not? Let's just do full revelation here, okay? You guys have probably heard a little bit about a guy named Garrett Ziegler. Ziegler comes to me as the errand boy to Peter Navarro, who I know very well, on the 6th of December. And I'd spent 2 weeks trying to get a hold of Director of National Intelligence Ratcliffe, because I thought, hey, if the DNI has a copy of this, we can make a stink long before the inauguration, right? Garrett Ziegler shows up at my townhouse in Washington, D.C., completely unannounced, tells me he understands I'm trying to get it to DNI and he's going to take it to him. Man, even Sam will know. I called him up that day. I was like, bro, you're not going to believe it. I think we got it in DNI. That SOB kept it. Did not give it to the Director of National Intelligence. And if he hadn't, I would have. So he betrayed America. You know, I'm sorry. I'm calling out everybody. And so the first thing I do in early January is I give a copy to Swedish National Television, because Hunter has an office inside Swedish House where he houses his broker-dealer, Rosemont Seneca. And he has a Chinese spy inside of his office. One of the things that Sam and I talked about for a good month before we found this was how was Hunter communicating with his Chinese communist handlers, because there were legion. Because they're not going to give him a satellite thumb drive or some sort of keys to the kingdom so he can communicate with his handlers in Beijing. Because they know he's a drug addict, a complete depraved individual with sexual proclivities that would, you know, lead your average American man to show up at his house with an axe handle and stop swinging until that thing broke. They know. So they inform him that we are hiring a communications specialist. You can say yay or nay. This is going to be an American citizen of Chinese extraction. I want everybody to know that almost every single Communist Party member with enough money sends their wife to America to have their baby. Okay? So that they have a passport. So they find someone, they hire her, him. First order of business is to go to Beijing for a 5-week communications course. What? So they can learn how to use Zoom and email and fax machines, if they still have those? No. This was so she could be the go-between between Chinese intelligence and Hunter Biden. So I give it to Sweden. They do nothing. I later found out last fall that they had handed it over to NATO, and I don't understand why they've done nothing. The next group I give it to is the Daily Mail of London. They agree to take it finally. I fly it out to them, spent 11 hours with their reporter Josh Boswell, give him a lot of credit for his courage. He's the one who broke almost all the stories. And so they begin publishing in April. Now, the first thing that the Daily Mail did when they got this laptop, they wanted to confirm the contents. So they hire a company called Merriman and Associates. The named partner, Merriman, is the former head of computer forensics at the FBI. They give him the laptop, he confirms that it's real, that it has not been manipulated, but he comes back to them with a, golly, it's too bad you don't have a bit-by-bit copy, because I'm sure there's probably stuff on the erased side. So for a year, I assumed that there was no erased side, that I did not have a bit-by-bit copy. Well, that didn't turn out to be the truth, and we'll get to that. And you remember in early June of last year, there was an article in the Washington Post published by a guy named Glenn Kessler, he's the fact checker, you know, for Pinocchio's guy, declaring that the dinner at Cafe Milano in Washington, D.C., in which Hunter took partners from Kazakhstan, notably Masimov and another guy named, it'll come to me, but very dangerous, dark characters. Masimov is coincidentally in prison right now in Kazakhstan, accused of fomenting that coup in January that we all forgot about when the Russians invaded Ukraine. He was Hunter's partner. So for a year and a half, I thought there's nothing on it. Next thing I do is I call Kessler. I said, hey, Glenn, I just want you to know you're wrong on this one. I respect you as a journalist, but here are several emails that will prove that Hunter had planned this meeting well in advance. Glenn responds very nicely, and then I dump him with tons of screenshots of Hunter overdosing prostitutes and buying and selling cocaine and having meetings with Masimov in Kazakhstan about selling out their patrimony of that country to CNOOC, Chinese National Offshore Oil Company. You know, I've got a response from him, so I dump him as much as I can. 6 days later, on the 16th of June of last year, I'm sitting in Kay Graham's chair inside the boardroom of the Washington Post. On my right-hand side is a guy named Peter Walston. He's, I believe, now the National Investigative Editor. Tom Hamburger, very good guy. I have nothing I'd say against him. Very smart guy. The National Investigative Reporter. I spent close to 3 hours with them. Go through the laptop, the crimes, the geography, the players. Hamburger, he looks like he's just like I'm connecting dots for him because he's a very good reporter. Peter Walston, I have to say, did not look like he had a smile under his mask. So they've had it since July 16th. I later went back to them and gave them 3 more copies, had another meeting in their boardroom on October 21st with Matt Beiser, the White House reporter, the traveling reporter with Joe Biden. He has his own copy. I plugged it into his computer and showed him how to turn it on. Nothing, right? So I keep fighting, not gonna quit, right? Gotta do something. I've been banned from Twitter. Twitter sent me a suicide note. They said, we hear you're considering killing yourself. Please don't do that. The Twitter family loves you. Here's a suicide hotline number. What the heck is this? Because my Twitter's not working. That's why I look at my emails. And the next email just after it is, you're banned for life. These people play for keeps, people. And so this is how I got the laptop. This is how I got it in my possession. I began immediately dumping documents, yada, yada, yada. One thing I think that everybody needs to hear about is I'd given it to Grassley. Now remember, these are the heroes of MAGA, right? Chuck Grassley, Ted Cruz, Marsha Blackburn, who's now over in Taiwan trying to gain credibility. Marsha, you could have done that last July 8th when I gave you the laptop. Nah. All these people on the Senate Judiciary kidding me. Now I want everybody to remember something. If Chuck Grassley, this is the recovered material. This is the 80,000 images and a couple 100,000 emails that I recovered, which are now in a state crime lab right now with the support of about 100 sheriffs. We're going after these people on the local level. But if Chuck Grassley, with Linda Graham and all those other heroes, had stepped out on the steps of the Senate on July 9th of last year and said, hey, we have what appears to be Hunter Biden's laptop and we're investigating it. Guess what wouldn't have happened last year? We wouldn't have run away in the middle of August from Afghanistan like shameless cowards. 13 Americans would still be alive today because the Democrats would have been on their heels. Now, okay, we didn't catch Afghanistan, maybe could have come out on September 1st. Because I guarantee you, they were public about investigating this. Anthony Blinken and those, garage band rock stars at the State Department would not have pushed the boundaries of NATO to the Russian frontier, and we would not have Ukraine. You would not have seen your gasoline prices double. You would not have seen natural gas prices double. You would not see potential famine in the third world in Africa. All of it comes back to the cowardice of our elected leaders in the Senate. That's just one story, okay? Now, the laptop had the original version had 128,000 emails. 120,000 of them were in archives. So you couldn't find anything in those emails unless you had a proper search term to look for. So, back in April of last year, I'm going through and I find a screenshot between a fellow named Buckman, a guy named Gottlieb from Boyce Schiller, senior partner at that august law firm, and a fellow named Jay Free, who it turns out is Louis Freeh's son. And there's a discussion about how they obscure the fact that Louis Freeh gets this client named Pavescu, who is Hunter's criminal partner from Romania, how they can get Louis Freeh to represent him because he's been prosecuted in Romania and is looking at 19 years in jail by a female prosecutor in Romania who is literally like a folk hero in Romania. You mention her name to a Romanian, you meet like waiting a table or something, and they will choke up and describe her as the bravest person in their country. Well, she put Hunter's bestie in jail. So what does Louis Freeh do? He travels to Bucharest 3 times to try and get him out. He offers up the FBI agents and spooks of Eastern Europe. We'll find something on this woman, we'll dogpile her. This is exactly what the FBI and the Department of Justice do to innocent Americans every day, right? This is their modus operandi. They have more money than you. They have your money. So they know that you're going to settle or cave. Not me. Not me. You know? So I find these emails that were actually sent by Buckman with like a destroy after reading. And later it turns out that Buckman was Freeh's chief of staff at the FBI. A highly trustworthy fellow. Mr. Buckman, I got a target on you, bro. And I find these documents, and the first person I call up is Bernie Carrick, right? Because I know that Rudy needs to see this stuff. Rudy was already in trouble at this point, so I didn't have his current cell phone number, but I knew that Bernie would give him a heads up. I call up Bernie Carrick, send him the screenshots of just 3 or 4 of 24 emails. First words out of his mouth, yo, bro. You know, gotta have the Bernie Carrick voice. Yo, bro, you know that prick Peter Strzok? Just putting it together. He's like best friends with Louis Freeh. I said, what are you talking about? He said, yeah, back in the 90s, remember he was the police commissioner of New York. He said, every time I saw Louis Freeh, I saw Peter Strzok, and I'm just putting this together. He then goes on to tell me that, guess who was the first person to call Louis Freeh, or to call Rudy Giuliani in the spring of 2016 when he went to Ukraine to investigate Hunter Biden's activities over there, to offer his aid, help, and friendship. Louis J. Freeh calls up Rudy. Rudy was apparently probably talking to Louis Freeh all the way up until the day I sent him those documents. That means Louis Freeh, an utter traitor to his oath and a traitor to the American people, was getting the inside scoop on both impeachments for the enemy. Okay? Now, if Louis Freeh in the spring of 2016, and this is also something very important, in the spring of 2016 another event happened. A very fine, reputable ambassador named Pyatt, P-Y-A-T-T, is replaced at the Kiev embassy by a woman named Yovanovitch. We all saw her in the impeachment hearings, along with little bow tie guy, Kent, and I can never remember her name, so I just call her the insufferable English coal miner's daughter. And they take over, right? Well, all of a sudden, Zolchevsky, it's hard, I get a little Copenhagen down my throat every now and again. So they take over, and all of a sudden, Zolchevsky, Hunter's boss at Burisma, is no longer guilty. He's pure as driven snow. And Yovanovitch and Kent and all these collaborators against the American people fire the Ukrainian prosecutor. How do we know this is crooked? Because in the same time frame, 800 kilometers to the southwest, Louis Freeh, the FBI agents in the State Department security apparatus, and others are doing everything they can to destroy the reputation of a female prosecutor in Bucharest so they get Hunter's friend out of jail. One of the other groups that Louis Freeh throws up are the FBI agents in the Bucharest Anti-Corruption Academy. Oh, and by the way, any Romanians out there, their students work for us now too, okay? This is how they play the game. They destroy people's lives, all right? And they were willing to do this to an incredibly brave female prosecutor in Romania. Why was Hunter partners with this guy? Because this guy was greasing the skids so that Hunter could buy the Ploeste oil fields in Romania on behalf of the Chinese communists. If anybody's, remembers World War II or had any grandfathers who flew in the Army Air Corps, we lost more airmen over Ploeste, the last source of Nazi oil, than we did over Berlin. And yet here we are 75 years later, and that disgusting punk son of this disgusting punk president is willing to sell that blood-soaked soil of our grandfathers to the communist Chinese, and nobody knows nothing? Not true. People we contacted in Romania said the State Department got involved in too, including the US ambassador, but they were too afraid. They didn't want to go on record because they know how the US government works. They can destroy someone's life anywhere on planet Earth because they're bullies. That's not the American way. We go and liberate countries and leave. These people go and soak those countries for every dollar they can. Why do you think Ukraine was so important to the Biden administration and the progressive left? Because it was their giant money laundering operation for planet Earth. Why do you think, and hat tip to Peter Schweitzer, the country that gave more money every year to the Clinton Foundation for 20 years was Ukraine? I guess Silicon Valley outside Kiev must be making a lot of people rich. Wrong, people. We send them $5 billion, and $1.5 billion comes back into the pockets of dirty politicians and their minions. Let's go back briefly to Kazakhstan, because I think this is important. If anyone remembers, we had a coup in Kazakhstan in January that got taken out of the press because the Russians invaded Ukraine. Who fomented that coup? Who provided the logistics to bring in those foreign fighters from Kurdistan and Syria to fight on behalf of Massimov, who's now in prison for treason? Who would benefit? Who would gain from having Massimov be put back in power? I'm going to have to say it's either the US government or Biden's handlers in Beijing. But because of the logistics, I'm going to guess it was our government. I also, sorry, I know I go all over the place, but I meant to do this at the start. For you, 3, 4, maybe half a dozen FBI agents who are out there listening to this, have you no shame? Have you no shame? Because let me tell you, the only ones in that organization who are going to have a legacy worth spit are going to be the brave ones who come and turn on their bosses. So do the right thing, people. right, so now we've got, where are we? We're, the Washington Post has it, the Senate Judiciary Committee has it. We go forward through Christmas. Here's something story I should tell you too, okay? One of my buddies from the Navy, former SEAL, sniper, guy they would send for me, right? In February of last year, I said, hey, check out this Dropbox. Look at these 8,000 emails. You're a cybersecurity expert. Do you think this is real? This is February a year ago. He opens it up, calls me back immediately, says, Maxey, I don't know why I did not trust you, but that was the dumbest thing I've ever done in my life. I'm now sitting scanning the hills behind my house with binoculars. I have asked my wife to come in from the driveway where she's washing our car. And I said, well, whoa, bro, what's the problem? He goes, you're a dead man, Maxey, unless you do something right away. I said, what do I do? He goes, you got to release those 8,000 emails to the public. I said, yeah, I'll get to that, you know. I'll do that sometime. He says, no, brother, you're doing it on the phone right now with me. And with experts, we chose 5 Dropboxes around the world. 1 in New Zealand, 2 in the UK, and 2 in the United States. These are the Dropboxes that the FBI tells us child pornography can be shared with impunity. Not a single one of those Dropboxes that I posted, and none of them were titled the contents of Hunter Biden's laptop, lasted more than 70 minutes. I think 3 of them were down under 10 minutes. So that means the FBI was doing cache searches around the internet to see if they could identify the contents of Hunter Biden's laptop that they've already declared as Russian disinformation. People, there are bad actors out there, very bad actors. And I want everybody to understand, our intelligence services, the FBI, CIA, you want to throw in Hayden, I guess NSA is on the hook too, the Department of Justice, the State Department, they're all in an ugly cover-up to protect their own decades-long of criminal activity in the name of all of us. All right? So, I'm finally around Christmas time. No one seems to be doing anything, right? Everybody's got the information. I'm in, weekly contact with the Washington Post. They're not doing anything. Plenty of other people you consider brave have had this thing for a long time, and no one's doing anything. You know why? Because everybody is afraid of their government. Everybody's afraid I get sideways with the FBI, I'm going to get audited by the IRS. Every 3-letter agency in the country is going to be on my back. And I hear this from people who are ditch diggers and billionaires. And when the consensus is that a free people need most fear their government, they're not a free people. And what we have to understand is they're picking the winners and losers. Remember, the FBI got the first copy of this from Mac Isaacs on the 9th of December of 2019. That means the FBI was in possession of exculpatory evidence in the midst of an impeachment of a sitting president. Forget what letters next to on your voter card. This is a betrayal of everything we stand for, right? This is a betrayal of simple Western jurisprudence. And yet, Peter Strzok, number 2 at the counterintelligence office at the FBI, then turned around and testified against the president in that same impeachment. And he had that copy of his laptop sitting in an office in Baltimore. Some big tells last week. We saw Christopher Wray come out, and people asked him, Director Wray, do you have the laptop? I cannot comment on that in an ongoing investigation. Well, where's it being investigated? In the Baltimore office. Well, the Baltimore office is where I was told last October this thing got dumped and hidden by the counterintelligence unit. And now we find out, oh, it's the counterintelligence unit that raided Trump's Mar-a-Lago. Oh, wow, it's the counterintelligence unit that's involved in all of this. Let's remember something, this is solid speculation on my part. The counterintelligence office of the FBI is not part of the FBI. That's why their office is next to NSA by the Baltimore airport instead of down in you know, that communist-looking building, the FBI headquarters. And Ray is now at the Baltimore office that's covering this. I told people this a year ago, all right? It's all coming true. And we are going to reveal all of this. Now, a lot of you guys heard that I went to Switzerland in March. I went there with the purpose of simply cataloging the 128,000 emails and making them visible so people could search them and work with them. I get to Switzerland, I have a very prominent attorney there who's helping me. On like day 3, he tells me he can't help me anymore. Why? Because you're involved in dangerous stuff. I said, but you knew that when we first started communicating. He said, yeah. But in the last week, the US government has threatened the Swiss government with going after every single one of their banks if they don't give up their historic non-alliance over Ukraine. The Swiss people folded. We're bullies. That's not the American way, okay? So now I'm in Switzerland, I get there, I fly in on an airplane from San Juan, Puerto Rico, a Spanish Air flight, Iberia flight to Madrid with a connection to Zurich. I bought the ticket 2 hours before the flight. To get on the flight, there's maybe 30 people on there. But the only like 40-year-old Chinese guys with dead eyes are sitting next to me. Yeah, I can assure you, everybody else cares about this. Like the 2 Chinese guys who stared me down 5 feet outside of a window in Zurich for an hour, okay? I get to this little boutique hotel in Zurich, and within 24 hours, I've got guys with like little beards and baseball caps and, you know, combat utility pants and, you know, this crazy like, you know, horse cinch belts and crap on. I confronted one of them. Then they disappeared, right? And so did I. I went out to the country where I can tell you the Swiss people took care of me. They knew what I was up to. They were all in 100% support. Here's something you guys would like to know, right? These people who love America. Guess who was providing me oversight in Switzerland for the last 2 months? The Swiss Hells Angels. 'Cause they love America.
Way to go,
that's why I carry their little sticker on the back of my phone. And you know why they love America and wanted to help me? Because 8 years ago, every single member of their organization was sent a letter by DHS declaring them terrorists and unable to travel on American airspace for the rest of their lives. They didn't do anything wrong. And I can tell you the Swiss Hells Angels are a little different than our Hells Angels, right? They don't put up with drug use. You slap a woman, you're out. You know, these are like just hardcore patriotic guys who like to ride their motorcycles and, you know, be good people. And yet our government, in our names, went and tried to destroy all these guys' lives. They never had an adjudication. They never said they committed a crime, but they declared them terrorists. It's got to stop, people. We're going to make it stop. So I get to Switzerland. I've got this guy, Vincent Kaufman. Vincent is the guy, by the way, who released that mirror image of a cell phone and a mirror image of an iPad that we found on the erased side. He had somewhat of a mental breakdown. He really was convinced that I was CIA and part of just a big cover-up. He emotionally and spiritually could not handle the fact that there are so many communications and awful pictures on this thing, which make clear that Hunter was abusing his 12-year-old niece, and nobody was doing anything about it. I empathize a lot with his senses on this, but I think he did the wrong thing. Anyway, we get there and he says, Jack, I'm convinced there's an erased side of this. I'm like, no way, man. Merriman and Associates said that this thing is just a mirror. He goes, you mind if I look? I said, no problem. Literally within 10 minutes, he's like, 20 gigabytes of pictures, 10 gigabytes of emails. Oh my God. Hunter has mirror images of his entire family's phones on there. Yes, Yes, for you stalwart agents out there, dirtbags, you have all this too. And what did you do about it? You engineered a betrayal of the entire spectrum of American voters so that you could put in power the only person you know who would keep omerta on your crimes. This is why Joe Biden is the president. None of those people would have gone along with this. Love him or hate him, I don't think that Bernie Sanders is a global criminal. But the Bidens are. And there were a couple of interesting things that occurred. Right around this time last summer, two brave individuals from military intelligence retired. They're part of that cadre trying to get our people out of Afghanistan at the time. It was very emotional for a lot of us. And they came to me at great risk, and they had three things. One thing they wanted to tell me, and two things that they wanted to ask about. The first thing was that they said that the FBI never filed Hunter Biden's laptop as a 302 and put it in evidence. That they didn't have perfect knowledge on this, but their guys on the inside had done a look through and they could not find it anywhere. All right? That should tell you why Christopher Wray can't produce the 302. Because they blew it. And they're gonna get taken down. Second thing they tell me about is, hey, is there anything on this computer about a company called Metabiota? You guys now know that Metabiota was the prime contractor inside all those Ukrainian labs. Yes, I revealed that too. And I said, I don't know. Metabiota. There's an email on there between Eric Schwerin, Hunter's broker-dealer manager, and Hunter, which says, Hunter, we've got to get a hold of Xiao Ying's husband because I think he and the CDC could be really helpful to Metabiota. Well, Xiao Ying, it turns out, is a woman named Xiao Ying Zhang, or Zeng, as they pronounce it, spelled Z-E-N-G. She's a daughter inside the major Shanghai CCP crime family called the Zengs. They run something called the Shanghai Clique, and they have a lot of overlap in Shanghai with another group called the Surprise Oil Clique. And guess what? Her husband is a guy named Fu Gao or George Gao, trained at either Oxford or Cambridge, spent a bunch of years in the United States, and he's a top guy at the Chinese CDC. You can look on your phones right now, type in Metabiota, put a search, Metabiota and Corona and bats. You'll find numerous scientific papers signed by George Gao, the husband of Hunter's secretary in Beijing, and Metabiota on, guess what? Coronaviruses, dozens of them. So now it turns out that Metabiota was created by US intelligence essentially in 2005, and I hope I'm not being too detailed. If you guys are getting bored with this, just, I'll shut down. In 2005, there was a presidential study done on weapons of mass destruction. It's unclassified, you can find it online. And in the WMD section of it, they had a section on biological and viral agents, be they lab-created, weapon of mass destruction, or naturally occurring. And after H1N1, we decided we needed an early warning system to be able to monitor these viruses and biological agents around the world. The recommendation in that document was that we create Special Forces fast teams, we train them up in biological weapons, and then we attach to them scientists who we will support academically and whatever else, but it's going to be an operation completely controlled under the umbrella of US intelligence. Well, like everything else that they did under Bush, they realized that by privatizing it, somebody could get rich. So they created Metabiota, sort of like Blackwater, right? And Metabiota is the prime contractor inside all those Ukraine labs that they now admit there are 20 some of them. I was the one who revealed that too. And we have to understand how this was allowed to happen. Now, anybody out there a big General Flynn fan? Okay, hold your clap. Because we now know that the biolabs were run out of the Department of Defense under the cover of the Department of Agriculture. Now, are you telling me that General Flynn, when he's running DIA during the period of time that all these laboratories were set up, didn't know anything about it? Somebody ought to ask him. Somebody needs to ask General Flynn. And I'll tell you something frightening. When I was in Switzerland, one of the first things we found was, and this is one of the reasons I didn't release it all. Hunter had root certificates on his computer that we found that seemed to provide him access to the Department of Defense's computer system with administrative function to be able to create emails out of whole cloth. So I knew this had to be shut down before anything. First people I called, thank you, Sam, was the U.S. Embassy in Bern, seeking a face-to-face with the regional security officer, and the reasoning behind this was, you know, then I'd get a low-level State Department guy, and there'd be 5 people in the room before CIA and FBI showed up and tried to get me to sign an NDA. Because we know they can't be trusted. I identified myself as an American citizen. I identified a breach in the Department of Defense's communication network. I spoke to a real person. They never called me back. First person I actually got on the phone was General Flynn on Friday morning. We found this Sunday night. And he didn't do anything. And 3 weeks later, he's posting on his Telegram thing about how I'm a big BSer, full of crap, right? Why? What's he trying to hide? Okay? So, and then Mac Isaacs hammering me, telling me that, this is impossible, everybody said it's not impossible. And Mac Isaacs is in a lot of trouble because there's correspondence between him and the Daily Mail from well over a year ago, and his attorney declaring that they do have a bit-by-bit copy. They were going to hand it over to Merriman and Associates, but they wanted Merriman and Associates to verify without even having seen it. So Mac, I'm calling you out as a liar. Have at it, bro. The other thing that we found was somebody else had apparently already looked through the erased side, because we found certificates on there for a program called Disk Drill off the shelf. And we have the 12-digit numeric certificate number. So with a warrant, we can identify who that was. I doubt it was Rudy and his attorney, Bob Costello. I guess it could have been Hunter before he lost the laptop, but somebody effectively erased about 10 or 15% of the erased side. Okay? This is terrifying stuff. Of the 80,000 images that I looked at, and you fathers out there, internalize this anger. Mothers too. Hell. I'd be more afraid of my mom, I think, than my dad. And dozens of pictures. I only looked at about 25 pictures, but there were images of young girls doing highly sexualized things to each other through their clothing, but grabbing each other's genitalia, all sorts of things, from fake sex acts. And they're all on Hunter's laptop. Why? My perception is that these are the classmates of his niece. Nobody did anything? Remember, before Rudy Giuliani delivered this laptop to me, he and Bernie Carrick went down to the Delaware State Police, to the Child Protective Unit, a unit, I might add, created by Beau Biden, with all this evidence. Correspondence inside the family. Hunter's not even allowed to be alone with a single child member of his family, by direction of his own family. But there's nothing to see there. I found out in April from Bernie Carrick that the Delaware State Police never did a welfare check, never did anything. They immediately turned around and handed that laptop to Peter Strzok and his criminal cabal down at the Counterintelligence Unit in Baltimore, where it's been sitting ever since. This is a betrayal beyond the scope of anything I can find in modern history I can't even find anything like this in ancient history of soda. Now, what I want people to come away from with this is not about Hunter. Remember Miranda Devine's book? How does she get a $4.5 million contract to write a book, and she didn't do the forensics that I did? On my own dime, I might add. Just so everyone knows, like, how come you're so fearless? I'm like, well, if Visa cuts me off, that'll be the last thing I have to lose. Because I'm operating on credit and fumes right now. And I've never taken any money from anybody because I didn't want the dirtbags to point at me and say, this is a guy who is doing this for money. You know why I'm doing this? Because I love all of you. And I love my children. And I love my flag. And I love my God, who I took an oath to defend this country to. That's simple. I am not going to arrive at that beer hall in the sky and have Davy Crockett and all my heroes not make room for me at the bar. I'm not going to go there in shame. Right? And there are plenty of 18-year-old Americans, including 13 that this administration murdered last August, who paid a bigger price than I have. And I'm not going to let them down. I'm not going to go to Arlington Cemetery and have to avert my eyes from those stones. I'm going to keep my bargain with those men and women. And all of you should too. Okay? So now we have the whole world recognizing it was counterintelligence who did this. We now have, you know, Peter Strzok even came out last week with like, oh, this is all nonsense. Hey, Pete, I've had a laser focus on putting you in an orange jumpsuit from the day I saw you testify against my president. And you know what the best thing is? Those FBI guys don't have a real good time in prison, right? Neither do pedophiles, Hunter Biden. So, we're in January of last year, and I'm sorry for jumping around, but I think you guys need to know this. And tell me if I already told you. Did I tell you I told the staff at Grassley to go F themselves? Not. I've been talking to so many people, I'm sometimes repeating myself. When I realized that Grassley and those guys are looking at the laptop is when Johnson and Grassley, come out with a press conference on about January 15th of this year and said, we have evidence that Hunter Biden traveled to Kazakhstan without the Secret Service. Like this is a bombshell. I reported that before the election. I also reported the purpose of that trip, which was to have a birthday party for Devin Archer, one of Hunter's two partners. The other guy is a guy named Jimmy Bulger, named for his uncle, Jimmy Whitey Bulger. Yeah, it's all there. And they're gonna have a birthday party for Devin, and then they're gonna circle up the best oil and gas leases in Kazakhstan for sale to CNOOC, Chinese National Offshore Oil Company. Now, a lot of people don't realize, but we have about $200 billion in energy investments in Kazakhstan because back in the early 2000s when the Kazakhstanis were starting to buy cars and, tether their goats, they realized they had a tremendous amount of mineral wealth in that country. And the Chinese were going to go in there and buy it all. So our own intel and our own State Department went to the Western oil companies and said, you have to go in there. And so we did. And we bought those oil and gas leases from the same person that Hunter did, Prime Minister Massimo, right? There's a lot at stake here. And one of the things that you have to understand when we talk about this laptop, it's not so much Hunter. Hunter is a pathetic loser, right? He's kind of like Christopher Moltisanti, remember, in The Sopranos, right? Also a crackhead. And frankly, he might have the same end that Christopher did with Tony in the car, right? Only it'll be Joe or someone else. He is a symptom of stage 4 cancer inside our republic. He's not the cancer. It's just the back pain that led me to the doctor to get the x-rays to show me that our country looks like a piece of Swiss cheese. Because Hunter could not have accomplished all this without the cooperation of state, CIA, FBI, and Department of Justice. They all covered for him multiple times. And something that's really sad to me, it's one of the things that makes me very angry. Joe Biden was the one who wrote the laws on crack cocaine that made 5 grams of crack equal to 500 grams of powder. So 5 little rocks in your hand was equal to a half a kilo of cocaine. This put 175,000 black Americans in jail for a racist law, and Joe Biden wrote it. This was at the time, remember when Hillary Clinton and all those guys were going to bring urban youth to heal, right? Where's BLM on this? I got a ride here actually from a prison guard from the Fed prison down here. And he told me that when I mentioned this, he said, yeah, we used to have riots in the chow hall weekly because of this. Everybody knew it was mean-spirited, 25 years ago. And it's still mean-spirited. And now the difference is when Hunter's on a crack or cocaine bender with a bunch of trafficked women, federal authorities come and rescue him. In spring, May of 2018, Hunter's on a bender at an $870 a night hotel with trafficked women and cocaine, and he accidentally Venmos $28,000 from Joe Biden's account to his drug dealers or his human traffickers. I don't know who it was. And instantaneously, 2 guys from Secret Service show up. Remember, Joe Biden doesn't merit Secret Service protection in 2018. So what are they doing monitoring his accounts? And why are they going to give Hunter a heads up that he sent too much money instead of arresting him and putting him in jail for 5 years like those 175,000 black Americans? You want racism? That's it. Institutionalized racism. Protection of a president's white punk while you same guys with the badges are putting black Americans in jail. Right? BLM, wake up. The party of slavery has always been about enslaving you. So, the other thing that happened that spring of 2018, you guys know this, it's obscene, I don't even want to go through it. Hunter's having sex with his dead brother's wife, while also sexually abusing his dead brother's daughter, and also having sex with his dead brother's wife's sister and his dead brother's wife's assistant. I mean, this is so depraved. Well, Hunter turns her onto crack cocaine and a little bit of meth while she's going through her sadness over her husband's death. And by 2018, she starts cleaning herself up. She realizes she's been in a fog of drugs. That's how Hunter uses people, abuses people. And she looks through her daughter's phone, and she finds very inappropriate communications between Hunter and the daughter. She accuses him, and I know this because Hunter recounts it several times, both to his attorney, his therapist, etc. One of his therapists quits when this is revealed to them. She didn't follow the Delaware statute and go to the police, though. Neither did Jill Biden, a licensed educator, making it a class 1 felony if she didn't go. Same with Ashley, Joe's shower partner. How about that last week, right? How about that? I guess now we know the diary's real, right? Remember, it was all fake, but now it's real. These people are beyond the pale. He has a .38 pistol inside his glove box in his $85,000 Raptor pickup, one of about 6 $80,000 to $100,000 cars that he owns. And she takes it out and throws it in a trash can in Greenville, Delaware. Guess who shows up? Delaware State Police, Secret Service, and the FBI. What happens to Hunter? She tells all of them, because I know this because Hunter recounts it to his attorney, that she's in fear of her life, she's in fear of her children's life, she's in fear of the public safety, and she's afraid that Hunter may self-harm because he's a drug addict and an alcoholic. Nothing happens. In fact, the only thing that happened is a Secret Service agent goes to the gun store outside of Wilmington and tries to get the yellow form so that they can remove any evidence that Hunter had the gun. It's a police state, people. Right? Thank God the guy in the Delaware gun store said to go pack sand. Right? Now, and this is something to do for the election. When Grassley calls me up, or when his staffers call me up, a guy named Josh Flynn Brown, by the way, if there's any press out there, they call me up because they know that I know now that they're looking at it. And they say, hey, Mr. Maxey, thank you for all you've done, but you know, we would like it if you would just tone things down a little bit because we've got a big election in the fall, and as soon as we win, we're going to do something about this. Really? You know how many times I've heard that from the Republican Party in my life? Every 2 years. You know what I told them? I said, go and fuck yourselves. You don't control me, and the national security of this country cannot wait for you feckless, bravehearts to win or not win another election. Okay? Now let's roll back here, because I think that we have to be fully revelatory about how large the betrayal of President Trump was. A lot of it was because of his own arrogance, and he surrounded himself by people who were like, oh, Mr. President, that tie looks fantastic on you. Instead of people who tell you the truth, those people get pushed to the side, and the sycophants are front and center. Somebody please explain to me how Mike Pompeo and Bill Barr, and Bill Barr, remember, we find out that Bill Barr was a 20-year veteran of the CIA after he leaves office, because that's too secret to reveal to the American people or even the Senate in a confirmation hearing. How can you have oversight over an organization which you don't even know what they're up to? It's impossible. So then I went to Switzerland, and now the rest is history. One thing I think I gave you guys a plea about 2 months ago for a good American sheriff. I found him. I got him. A month ago, yesterday, I went and met with these sheriffs. And I filed an evidence form with the laptop and the 400 gigabytes of erased. Anybody who thinks there can't be 400 gigabytes of erased material doesn't realize how erased material works. High definition picture is turned into a grain of sand. So yeah, the erased stuff might have been only 120, but when expanded to a high definition picture, that number goes up much higher. So now they have it. It's sitting in a very friendly state crime lab, probably the lab that's second best to FBI. I loathe to use that term and FBI in the same sentence. But I also want to tell you guys, I criticize these guys a lot. I criticize the FBI, I criticize CIA. And I don't do that just because I want to be mouthy. My grandmother was one of the first hires at OSS, spent her entire career at CIA. She raised me. A woman who was born right here in Forest City, about 50 miles away. And one of my uncles was a deputy director of the FBI. I was raised my whole life to believe that these organizations represented the best of what America was supposed to be. So it pains me when I have to call them out as corrupt actors who've robbed you of your liberties and your freedom and your democratic process over and over again. But we have to do something, people. And now you're hearing both Barr and Pompeo. Pompeo's gonna run for president. Hey, Mike, you're gonna have a blonde guy with crazy hair following you around everywhere you go. No way you're gonna be president of this country. And this has been covered up for a long time. A confidential informant told me that he briefed 2 CIA station chiefs on all this stuff, and in desperation went to Rubio and the Intel Committee. This is 4 years ago. Nothing. And when you look at Burisma, right, there's another guy on that board of directors. His name is Cofer Black. Cofer Black is a former CIA case officer. He somehow hired onto the $82,000 a month gig as a Burisma board member. His signature is all over dozens and dozens of documents right next to Hunter's. So please tell me how a prominent former case officer ends up on the board of directors at Burisma in 2016, and his bosses at the agency don't know anything about it? Nonsense. Utter and complete nonsense. And let's remember something. Joe Biden had 2 tasks that he was given by Barack Hussein Obama. Only 2. Because, you know, slow Joe can't do 3 things at once. First one is he's supposed to go to China and threaten Chairman Xi to stop building those landfilled aircraft carriers designed to put our children at the bottom of the sea. He fails. But he flies over there with Hunter, and he meets a couple of Hunter's Chinese business partners, and a month and a half later, Hunter has a $1.5 billion commitment from the Bank of China for a private equity fund, right? Chairman Xi is the Bank of China, by the way. He's the one who made that decision. I would say Chairman Xi is the general partner of Bohai Harvest. They do this. He gets the big deal from China. Dad fails, big deal from China. Goes over to Ukraine. His job is to run those pesky Russians out of Crimea, right? He utterly fails. But what happens to Hunter? Hunter gets a job shortly afterwards by Burisma. Guess where most of Burisma's operating gas and oil assets are? Inside occupied Crimea. They've been making book every day. And the son of the president, the guy who was supposed to clear the Russians out of Crimea, is now getting $82,000 a month. A month. You know, how many people in this room make that in a year? And his dad failed and Hunter got a job. This is ugly, 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 ugly business. The Chinese communists are deeply involved. The Zheng family that I mentioned earlier, when Joe Biden went on his first trip to China in the late 80s, early 90s, he was hosted by the Zheng family. He spent 3.5 weeks there. What kind of deals did he cut? He's been compromised by the Communist Chinese since before he even dreamed of becoming president. This is how the game is played, right? Go look at the ex-ambassadors of the United States and look at the boards they sit on. They're all Chinese companies. Essentially what has happened is the crime family known as the CCP, and I think the best way to describe it is the way Hollywood describes the mafia here, right? You got the Zheng family running Philadelphia, you got the Xi family running Beijing, New York, and you've got someone else running Kansas City and all around the world. They're in bed with these people. He's not going to betray them. You remember, Trump got impeached for a 1.5-minute long conversation with Zelensky, the same crazed monkey who we're theoretically supporting now. And Joe Biden on tape describes that he had 25 hours of private sit-downs, just him and Chairman Xi and one translator. And I can assure you that translator didn't come from the State Department, right? Where are those transcripts? You know, when are we going to have the hearings on his bestie, Chairman Xi? And what you have to understand is, I say this a lot, it seems like we've got an audience with faith. Never forget, the Son of God was betrayed for what is the equivalent of less than $300 in today's money, right? What do you think they're going to do for $500 million? If Hunter had cut any of the energy deals that he was trying to cut, like the one that Bobulinski revealed in Oman, where they were going to sell a third of the oil and gas fields of Oman to the Communist Chinese, and Hunter was brokering it, they would have been $1 billion family. $1 billion family. And, you know, Sam, if the monkey arm has to come out, because one thing I did learn from Bannon is someone gives you a microphone, you don't shut up till they tell you to shut up. No, so, I mean, we've just been betrayed, and at the heart of it is greed. Think about this. 80% of all of our medicine in this country comes from Communist China, because our drug manufacturers sold us out, just the way they sold out Bethlehem Steel and everything else that our fathers used to work for, right? So how are we going to have a hot war with China when the heparin and the penicillin comes from our enemy? We don't make aspirin in America. If the pandemic was not a wake-up call that we have broken this country, and that at minimum, vital drugs and medicines need to be brought home, I don't know what's going to wake up the American people. I'm going to tell you, it was me who went to the White House on the 26th of January with a binder this thick, because I uncovered the SARS outbreak on Christmas night. You know, a full 11 days before the National Security Council says they did. How? No one's given me $1 trillion budget, but I was able to find it. And that's when Steve said, you've got to start devoting everything on this. So what did I do? I went out and read every single scientific article on SARS-1 and pulled out the top 10. Then I went and started to find out how many PPEs we actually had in our pandemic supply. All open source. This is 10 days into it. Guess how many N95 masks we had in our national pandemic supply? 27 million. You know how many were supposed to be there? 4.5 billion. And we spent close to $15 billion over the prior 10 years, handing $1 billion to Cuomo and $1 billion to the mayor of Chicago, and they didn't spend it on what they were supposed to spend it on. So we are in a big fight here, and it's not just for America. I mean, this whole Ukraine thing, right? We're collapsing our Western economies for what? Right? How does this have any impact on our national security? We're depleting our own military supply system to provide anti-tank weapons to these people. Right? We need these things. And how does a feckless prior stand-up comedian all of a sudden worth $30 million as a politician? He must have paid attention when he was watching Joe Biden's rise to power. This is corruption across the board. I mean, to illustrate how bad it is, in the fall of 2015, Bill Clinton is supposed to go give a speech in Shanghai, like the Shanghai Economic Conference. He's going to get paid $500,000, $800,000. They'll pick him up in a G5, stay at the Four Seasons, probably get him a little action, and then he flies home, right? Well, in the fall of 2015, even Bill Clinton realizes, well, if Hillary runs, the optics on this are not going to be good, right? Hunter and Devin Archer and James Whitey Bulger have nothing to do with this conference. But the top levels of the Communist Party in Beijing reach out to Hunter and Devin for a solution. We need a new speaker. You know what the first comment out of Hunter's mouth on the little text, the response is? Do you want me to call Madeleine Albright? Do you want me to call Colin Powell? Do you want me to call Tony Blair? Why in God's name would any of them even take his phone call? Why would Louis Freeh take the phone call of a guy who got kicked out of the Navy in 2016 for cocaine? These are bad people. Also in all that correspondence between Freeh and Hunter, he gives the grandchildren a $100,000 gift. Who else in the structure gave gifts to the Biden grandchildren? Because nobody gave my kids a $100,000 gift. None of you either. People, we need to take this back. We need to keep the pressure on. And one thing that I love is these guys are losing control of the narrative. As I said earlier, 79% of the American people polled. That means we've got half the Democrats too. Say that if they'd known about Hunter Biden's laptop, they would not have elected Joe Biden to be president. Joe Biden had to be president so that Pompeo and Barr couldn't be uncovered, so that Peter Strzok and James Comey and Louis Freeh and all the other bad actors and Gina Haspel and all these people couldn't be revealed to the American people. They knew that Joe Biden would keep omerta. Who else keeps omerta? The mob. That's what we're up against. Ask yourself, how is it that these people show up in Washington, you know, with a middle-class suit on and an overnight bag, and 10 years later they leave in a Ferrari with a silk suit and a summer house in Nantucket? It's not because they're honest brokers, right? How come the United States Congress is the only people in America who can't be prosecuted for insider trading? And when you look at the performance of the average portfolio of a member of Congress, they'd be in the top quartile of American hedge funds. It's not because they're honest. It's not because they care about you, right? I've said it for a long time. We should replace every single one of them. And you guys who watched me out you watched me on War Room. I interviewed every single one of those people over a year and a half. You know the only elected official in America who ever called me? Marjorie Taylor Greene. Anyway, I can see that the monkey arm's coming out over here on the right-hand side. I probably got to clean up. But what I want you guys to understand is, you, as an individual, have human agency. You can make a difference. I mean, look at me. I'm a broke yokel with like 3 outfits to my name at this point, and I'm making a difference. Damn right. So, the last thing, later on today, before you guys leave, and listen, big love to all of you guys, right? Nobody would be engaged in this. Sam wouldn't be engaged in this. His wife wouldn't be engaged, and Mary Grace wouldn't be engaged in this if our major motivation was not love. Love for you guys, love for that flag, and love for our forefathers who worked their fingers to the bone to give us everything that we had. They didn't have pensions. They didn't have like life insurance and all this crap. They just did their duty. And so what this is a call to duty. Everybody knows what the right thing to do is. Do it. Go out and commit yourselves to doing the right thing every day. Because there is no power on planet Earth that can defeat the American people armed with the truth. And the last thing is, do not let Bill Barr and Mike Pompeo and any of those other feckless leaders in the Senate or House turn this into an independent counsel investigation. Because we'll find out about that in 2030. Hold their feet to the fire. We want open hearings. Anybody who wants to come take a picture with a laptop login page, I'll be in the back. Love you guys.